so if you look around, you know that that most of the food that most people are eating isn't food, can't nourish you, can't satisfy you. So why on earth is it there? Is it there? Is it just to make money, or does it in some way benefit a certain group of, or a certain, let's say, just does it benefit the economy in some way for us
Yeah.
to be sick? And we can see the explosion in chronic disease as well.
So, Ben Hunt, a big welcome to the Your Body's Way podcast. I'm really happy to have you here. How are things over there? You're just outside of Sheffield, you said.
Just outside of Sheffield, yeah. I mean, it's it's hot and sunny like it is every day in England.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Um,
it's
I'm
not it's nice to get a break from the intense heat actually right now.
I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure it rivals the Caribbean here in the
I
Grand
know.
Cayman Islands. Yeah. I'm sure it's a rival. But it's so great to talk to you because I spoke to Phil Escott recently, and that was an absolutely fabulous podcast. And I said to him, when I'm researching Phil Escott, you can't help but come across Ben Hunt
Mm.
because you've written books together. You're doing the Big Fat Challenge together, which looks really awesome. What
Yeah.
is that, like a 90-day carnivore challenge or something?
Yeah, it's a 90-day challenge. It leans towards the carnivore, but the trick really is to say that when you fuel your body using what we call the manufacturer's recommended fuel, which is fats from the animal kingdom, then that's really the key to the massive improvements in health that we see. Yeah,
Mm.
so it's not the problem with the term carnivore is that it focuses on meat because that's what it means. Whereas yeah, I mean that's what Weston Price discovered, of course. Is that it was the removing the fats of animal origin from the diet was what he claimed was the root cause of the diseases of civilization, and we're seeing very much the same panning out today.
Mm. And it's great. Again, that's why it's so great to have you on this podcast because we've had many guests on this podcast who love the work of Dr. Weston A. Price, and I'm also a big fan of his work as well. So you're very much in line with the conversations that I want to be having on this podcast and the listeners want to hear. Um, but it's really great because we were just talking just now about your book. So I think it came out this year, right?
Came out, I think maybe last year, the our second book, the Red Pill Food Revolution.
Right. Yeah. So here it is. So I'm holding it up. It's the Red Pill Food Revolution. And I have to say, well, I've almost finished. I haven't finished the entire thing, but I'm almost at the end. And I have to say, it's terrifying. Like, and it's challenging, and some parts of the book are hard to read, and not because I think, oh, what are these people talking about, but because there's truth. Like I feel truth when I'm reading it. I'm just like, oh my God, like everything that you're talking about when you talk about the system and how, we won't dive into it too much, but how the system is kind of, constructed in a way to benefit some of the owners of the system. And you basically, I'd recommend this book for anybody who is interested in this sort of thing and they want to know exactly the exact details and how it relates to the food industry, like how the food industry is shaped to benefit the higher powers rather than us. And I think anybody who wants to learn, like they really want to learn about it, then this is a good book to read because it looks like there's so much research in here. And I mean, how long did it take you to put together? Like, what was it like writing a book like this?
Yeah, it took a couple of years, and we did it. There's four of us involved. There's me, Phil Escott, who you spoke to recently, Dr. Jeremy Ayres, and Graham Norbury. So we all met on. We got together on Zoom calls that we recorded. We threw the ideas around, and then it fell to me to put the words together and to try and piece together the logic. But honestly, it was a life-changing experience writing that book. Um, because when you create something like that to communicate to other people, it makes you turn your ideas concrete right? It really makes you, make them real, and figure out what it is that you really think. And so, you then elevate yourself. You elevate your own thinking when you force yourself to communicate it in that way. And that's something I've found, because I came from a background in web design and marketing, copywriting and stuff like that. And so I've been blogging since the mid 2000s. I've been blogging for over 20 years, and that's what I found. That when you write something down, it forces you to make your ideas more concrete, and then that you can then step onto that and then reach bigger ideas as well. But yeah, absolutely mind-blowing book once we actually thought about it. And it leads on from one that we wrote, that we brought out in like 2021, called The Red Pill Revolution,
Right.
which did
Yeah.
touch on the same subject. And that was more about, why is the world so confusing, and why does it appear as though it's not really set up to be run in our best interests? And we
Mm.
touched on things like the agricultural revolution at the end of the last ice age, and the invention of grains as a foodstuff. But I would say that if we know we can see the truth in this argument, and I know it's a confrontational book, but if
It's
you look around today,
confrontational, like it's hard to read, like like that's what I found anyway. I don't know how other
yeah,
people find it, but
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
for sure.
and that's what we said about the first one. We said it might be a bitter pill to swallow, and it definitely is. But when you look around it, we know that most of what is called food today, apart from the fact that it isn't actually food, because the way that we define food is, food should nourish and satisfy you. And these modern, what is it? What Michael Pollan calls food-like edible substances, or food-like products. These are absolutely not designed to satisfy you. In fact, they're designed to get you to go back and want more.
Right.
Um, so, and they can't nourish, because they're generally made from 5 cheap row crops, which are wheat, sugar, corn, soy, and seed oils.
Mhm.
So, and these things are not essential for humans. They contain only a fraction of the rainbow of stuff that we do need. And so, like Zoe Harcum says, Americans are now eating 70% of what Americans are eating today, roughly, is ultra processed food, which comes from basically these 5 things, which are nutritionally empty. So
Mhm.
how on earth are you supposed to get 100% of the nutrition that you need from 30% of your plate? It just doesn't add up. It's a mathematical impossibility. But so if you look around, you know that that most of the food that most people are eating isn't food, can't nourish you, can't satisfy you. So why on earth is it there? Is it there? Is it just to make money, or does it in some way benefit a certain group of, or a certain, let's say, does it benefit the economy in some way for us
Yeah.
to be sick? And we can see the explosion in chronic disease as well.
Yeah. And
Which,
I have to say that those are the parts that challenge me the most. Like, is it just to make money, or is there something bigger going on, that that they know that this food isn't good for us, but but it actually benefits them in some way. And I think anybody who wants to really dive into that, like, the book is excellent for that. But what you've just said, I presume you're talking about like super hyper processed foods, like like the bars, the biscuits, the cakes, the pastas, and all of these things. I think anybody listening gets that, and they're like, well, yeah, that, obviously that's not nutritious, and everyone's who's listening to this, I'm sure they're trying to be healthier, and they're trying to move away from that stuff. But what's really great about your book is that you're actually championing um, meat, like animal-based products, fatty meats, and how that's the best thing for our health. And there's this line in the book that I picked out that I thought was really good, and I thought it summed up the book quite well, and it leads to my next question. So one of the lines is, I don't think you'll remember this, but it says, the system would have you believe the bullshit story that humanity is somehow independent from nature, and that our ancestral diet is just some inconvenient evolutionary legacy. So basically what you're trying to say is, you know, the 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 system, or like, we're being told that, red meat isn't good, avoid animal produce, go vegan, go plant-based, but you're saying, but our ancestral where we're from. We're clearly meat eaters. So, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? Like, we're forgetting how to eat. And we're, like you said in the book also, we're looking to professionals to tell us what to put in our mouth, when really our bodies know, and we know just by looking at history what we should be eating. So, can I just dive into that then? What is our ancestral diet? Like, what is the truth there?
It's a great question. Um, and the answer kind of depends on your latitude.
Mm,
So the Paleolithic period was from maybe like 2.5 million years ago to just 12,000 years ago. So let's take the generally accepted anthropological timeline, right? That human beings, that Homo sapiens, our species, have been around for about 200 to 250,000 years, right? So roughly 250,000 years. So 95% of that time was in the Paleolithic, and most of that time, around 70% of that, was in ice ages. Right now, the Earth is in an interglacial period where it's pleasantly warm, where, as we've already established, and like
Sheffield.
very, very nice out,
Mm,
um, and stuff grows very well, and there's lots of plant life. But most of the period that humans have been around, never mind the period uh, that we were evolving into this species, was during ice ages. And so if you were outside of the middle bit of the earth, of the tropics, then it would have been pretty jolly cold, long winters, a short growing period in the summer. So we have this idea that an ice age means that the whole world is covered with ice. That's not absolutely not true. It was only a few degrees cooler than it is now, on average, but it did mean that we a much longer winter, shorter growing periods, so fewer plants around, and the animals that were around, that were eating the plants, would have tended to be big. One reason for that is because the more massive the animal is, the less surface area proportionally it has. So it's actually much more efficient to be big and fat when it's cold. Um, and so very fat animals like, the mammoths, your elk. And if you imagine that their way of eating would have been much like kind of reindeer and ox and stuff like that today, bison. So they would have had to have been big and strong to clear away the snow and get to the mosses, the lichens, and the plant matter underneath the snow. And so that's what humans outside of the tropics would have had to eat. Now, in the tropics, we have this idea that, oh, there's fruit on the trees all year round. That's just not true. There are still growing seasons, like where you are, in a tropical zone. There are still growing seasons for different fruits. But also the other thing is, because so much fresh water will have been locked up in the ice sheets in the ice age, that actually meant that the tropics themselves would have been much drier during the ice ages as well. So again, we would have we're highly confident that humans must have evolved eating fatty meat, and never mind, for one basic reason, that's what we chose to paint pictures of on the walls of our caves. And it's also logically the only way that we could have, well, there's a couple of hypotheses, but we will have needed a lot of fat to grow our big brains.
mm,
Okay, so it will have been a carnivorous diet, a mainly carnivorous diet. So in biology, a hypercarnivore is an animal that gets at least 70% of its food from the animal kingdom. So definitely hypercarnivores, whether it was large animals, land animals, or whether it was from the sea as well, with a lot of the omega-3 fats. So there's the aquatic ape hypothesis as well, which is also very interesting, that humans will have really evolved where the land meets the oceans, the land meets the water, and had a mainly seafood diet as well, which is also very valid. But bottom line is, we know 100% that our guts shrank in order that our brains could grow, and that
mm,
the only way that could have happened is on a very high fat diet. And we know the same thing, that people who we know that a high fat diet today, a high fat ketogenic diet, is also ideal for promoting brain health, for maintaining a large brain into old age, for preventing brain shrinkage, High-fat ketogenic diet has been used to counter epilepsy for over 100 years. This has been well
Mhm.
known, as well as things that it's all coming out these days on even things like ADHD, bipolar disorder, Alzheimer's. You know, we are simply designed to run on fats. So that's what the big fat challenge is about. It's saying, aside from anything else, just put the right fuel into your body. You know, we're meant to run on diesel, not gasoline. You know,
Mm.
if carbs are like gasoline, right? Like petrol, you know, they burn quickly and then they're gone, but it's not good for your engine to keep putting
Mm.
that stuff in because
So
it will clog it up.
would you say that we should, so would you say that most of us should be, if not all of us, should be eating a carnivore, like a hyper carnivore diet? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying that it's only for people who, because Phil said something interesting in one of his books, that I remember quite distinctly. He said, if your body is so badly out of balance, so for example, his story is that he had rheumatoid arthritis and he healed it through going carnivore. And there are so many other examples out there. And we talked about the lion diet, for example, like, you know, Michaela, she talks about how, you know, she reverses autoimmune disease through the carnivore diet, or the lion diet, she calls it. Is like ketogenic and carnivore, like all of those really extreme diets, are they for everybody, or are they just for people who are so badly out of balance that they need to bring it back? Like, so should, for example, someone who's fairly well and feeling good, like, for example, I feel quite good, like there's nothing major going on with me. Like, would I benefit from the carnivore diet? Should I be going carnivore like our ancestors? Or, you know,
Mm.
what's your approach there?
I would say it's optimal.
Mm,
Um, and at the same time, our bodies have a detox potential for certain things. Like take, for example, oxalates, or oxalic acid that you find in certain foods and in higher concentrations in certain foods, like green leafy plants, for example. Your body can process out 150 to 200 milligrams of oxalate per day, which is fine, and that it will do you no harm to consume some of that from some herbs or whatever. We get it from
mm,
tea, get it from cocoa, stuff like that. But if you've been really ravaged by that stuff, and so yeah, to cut a long story short, I agree with Phil. Um, a lot of people out there are suffering from some very severe symptoms that are a result of being chronically intoxicated by plants.
mm,
And if you are one of those people, and particularly leaky gut or intestinal permeability, that is already affecting at least 70% of everyone walking around out there. Um, and the main causes, I mean, there's lots of causes for that, but one of the main ones is lectins, gluten, these plant proteins that we are unable to use, that our bodies can't handle, and that they literally just open up holes between the endothelial cells in your gut and allow stuff to get into your bloodstream that just ain't meant to be there. And that is basically the root cause of autoimmunity, which is going off the charts. And there's so many autoimmune diseases, not just like you've got psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, Crohn's, you know, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There's there's over 100 autoimmune conditions, and these things just basically didn't exist. They really weren't part of the human experience. If you look back, there was a survey done in the town of Boston, Massachusetts, as was in the year 1811, I think, or 1812, and they recorded every cause of death in that year, and there were 942 deaths in Boston that year. 5 were attributed to cancer, and there wasn't one heart attack. Okay. There was no record of diabetes. There was no record of Alzheimer's. Any of these things just didn't exist. And it's not that
mm,
we didn't know how to recognize them, because people were just as smart 200 years ago as we are now, right? If not smarter. Um, these things just didn't exist. The first, heart attack in the United States wasn't recorded until just before 1900.
mm.
And yeah, Alzheimer's didn't, similarly, it was just after 1900 that these things actually entered the public consciousness. And then already by like 1930, coronary heart disease was already the #1 killer in the US. The optimal for everybody, I think, is that hypercarnivore way of eating, which is that 70% of your food should come from the animal kingdom. And the reason is that because we are biological carnivores, that's we get all of the amino acids that we need in the right proportions. We get all of the fatty acids that we need, the essential fatty acids, again in the right proportions from the meat and fat and organs of large ruminant animals. Maybe with some shellfish here and there, but we can have some fungi, we can have some eggs, we can have some foraged herbs and nuts and seeds and whatever from the appropriate time of year, because that would all be within your body's ability to process. So if you think about it, throughout the Paleolithic, we'd have survived the winter on stored fat and stuff like pemmican, maybe some fungi and whatever. We would only have had nuts and seeds in one particular part of the year, which would have helped us it would have promoted a very important survival trait, which is called obesity. So that is putting on extra body fat, and that would have helped us to survive the cold of the winter and also to have energy throughout the winter when food was scarce. A vital survival trait. So we know that polyunsaturated fatty acids can promote obesity. We know that obviously excess carbohydrates, which we would have got in the form of soft fruits at the time of year, will promote obesity. They'll give you an insulin spike that tells all your fat cells to go into storage mode. So absolutely essential, very, very important. It's like our bodies don't have any mechanism for self-destruction, right? If our bodies appear to be self-destructing, attacking themselves, breaking down, it's not the body's fault. The fault is that we are just out of step with our evolutionary design. So obesity is a really good thing. 365 days of the year, not so much. You're not supposed to be having a toxic amount of carbohydrates and omega-6 fats every single day of the year, but that is the way that people are living today.
Because you're carnivore, right? You eat carnivore. That's your diet, would you say?
I'm primarily carnivore. So yeah, 90 to 95% of what I eat is meat and fat.
Yeah, because I came across a video. I think you were talking about your Substack, the Way of the Carnivore, and it looks great. And you said that you went 90 days carnivore, and you said that your benefits far outweighed what you ever would have imagined. So I was just interested in what that meant. Like, what did you get from those 90 days of just eating animal meat, like animal proteins and local herbs and spices, as you said? Like,
yeah,
what did you get?
it was transformational. I mean, I didn't stick to it 100%. I had a period where I went back on the coffee and stuff. But the main thing for that, and this is what we say: it's not that meat is magic. Meat isn't magic. Fat isn't magic, right? And the fact that your body can heal itself is not magic either. I don't go out there telling people that meat heals. No, we heal. Your body can heal itself from all kinds of things, with an emphasis on all, right? All kinds of things, even the things that they tell you are incurable, generally aren't incurable. But I'm not going to go into specifics on that right now. What we need to do is just put in the building blocks and the fuel that your body needs, which is the appropriate aminos, fatty acids, and micronutrients, and minerals and vitamins, all of which you get from the meat and fat of large animals. And that's also why, by the way, 70% of all known animal species are carnivorous, because it's a lot easier to get your nutrition from eating other animals, because they've already been processed, right? Actually, eating plants is an extremely specialized biological trait, right? And there's no plant-eating animal that can go out anywhere and just start munching on anything green, because they'll die. plants have dozens, if not hundreds, of toxic chemicals in them for self-defense because they are rooted to the ground. They can't run away. They can't fight. So their defense is mainly chemical weapons. And they've had millions of years to develop those. And animals that want to eat plants have had millions of years to adapt to be able to eat those plants. So koalas eat only eucalyptus leaves. We can't eat eucalyptus leaves. It'll make us very sick. You can have a tiny amount of eucalyptus oil in a tea, for example. Pandas eat nothing but bamboo. We can't survive on bamboo, but you could have a little bit. So we need to appreciate it's an extremely difficult and specialized thing to get your nutrition from plants. And you also have to realize as well that cows and gorillas and stuff can't digest plants, that the digestion is done by trillions of bacteria that live in their guts. We haven't got big enough guts to house those bacteria in order to, because what the bacteria do is they can break down cellulose, which is a complex carbohydrate, and they then consume the glucose molecules. They then excrete short-chain fatty acids that the cow or the gorilla or the orangutan or whatever then actually digests. That's what goes through the gut wall. And so gorillas and cows are actually on high-fat diets. They ingest green material, green plant matter, which is very poor quality, but they digest fatty acids from the bacteria and the dead bacteria themselves, which is where they get the protein from, because there's barely any protein in plants and bamboo and eucalyptus. So where was it going with that?
Were there, so before you went carnivore, were there things that you wanted to solve in your own health that were solved? Or like, what were the benefits at the end? Like, how were you at the beginning and where were you at the end?
Well, with my 90-day challenge, the thing that blew my mind is that, like I say, it's not that meat and fat are magic. They just are appropriate food, right? But the thing that blew my mind was it was the cutting out of what I've then come to realize are just legalized drugs. That wheat and sugar in particular, I mean, this is weird because I mean, I was a heavy drinker until the end of last year. I would probably have typically 6 pints of beer a night or equivalent every night of the week, right? I smoked, I had coffee every morning, which I needed because I didn't sleep that well because I was drinking alcohol every night. And so that was the big thing, is that come January the 1st, 2024, I stopped all of that stuff together. The alcohol and the tobacco were easy compared to caffeine, wheat, and sugar. They were the real, they are the tough ones, right?
You
But we
call
know
sugar
that,
sweet heroin in your book, which I thought was a very, like, I think that's a very appropriate name for it.
absolutely. But they plug people into brain scanners. Right? You feed them sugar, and all the same bits of the brain light up when you have sugar as light up when you have crack. It really is no different, and it's just as addictive. And wheat triggers the opiate receptors in your brain as well. So wheat is actually much more like heroin, whereas sugar is much more like cocaine. But yeah, this is well known, and there's a reason why 70% of all of the grocery products on the shelves in the United States have added sugar. That's not even including natural sugar, right? It's from like fructose or honey and stuff like that. Added sugar, and the reason is because it's all that's what the economy demands. The economy demands that you make products that people don't want to stop eating because that's how you make money. And you have to realize, then we talk about the rise of the corporations in the Red Pill Food Revolution, that the directors of corporations are actually now bound by fiduciary duty. They have a legal obligation to maximize the returns for their shareholders. And that then means that all these food companies out there are going to be doing anything in their power to sell more of their product. And if that means making it addictive and innutritious, then that's what they're going to do. And that's what they even tell us they're going to do it. What's the Pringles ad say? Once you pop, you can't stop. And this is by design. We've known this since the 1960s, when they cracked the code of how to make food-like products hyper palatable and addictive. And it's the combination of primarily it's combining fat and carbohydrates in one meal.
Hmm.
in one foodstuff. If you look at nature, Zoe Harcum talks about this. Because I learned this from Zoe. If you look at nature, then foods are generally either fat and protein or carbohydrate and protein. There's very, very few things, very, very few food sources in the whole of the natural world that combine fats and carbs in the same mouthful. And they are basically um, dairy, so the milk of mammals, nuts and
Nuts. Yeah, I was
seeds
gonna say.
and
Mm.
avocados, right?
Mm.
Now, what do those things have in common? What they all have in common is that the
They're
creature,
Moorish.
well, they're Moorish, but why are they Moorish? Because the creature that creates them wants them to be consumed compulsively. So,
Mm.
as a
Mm.
mammalian
That's
mother,
interesting.
like
Yeah.
yourself, right? You want your offspring to consume as much breast milk as possible in the shortest possible time, so that they can grow, become strong, and that's then good for their survival. Okay, nuts and seeds as well. They want animals to consume them compulsively, which is what they do, right?
Mm.
So, if you think about any food that you just can't stop eating, like Pringles. What are Pringles? Pringles are wheat and vegetable oil. Donuts, wheat and vegetable oil and sugar, right? Chocolate is sugar and generally vegetable oil or dairy fat, right? All of these things, pizza, Mars bars, everything that you can think of, cake, biscuits, cookies, all of these things roughly equal amounts of fats and carbs. And then they throw in sugar because that's addictive too. And they throw in the right amount of salt. And they go to great lengths to make the mouth feel and the texture and the crunch. So it's triggering all of the things that our brain goes, oh, that's great. That's food, that is,
Mm.
without being food. So that you eat it and then you're hungry again 5 minutes later. Like Coca-Cola's got loads of salt in it. No one realizes this.
Really?
If you drink Coca-Cola, the amount of salt in Coke, which they've hidden with all the sugar and the acid that they add to it, Coca-Cola doesn't quench your thirst. You drink Coca-Cola, you're going to want another one straight afterwards, and that's by
Correct.
design.
Yeah.
It's
And
mental.
that was really interesting when I was reading your book, because the way that you put it, you're like, the food that you've been describing, they're hyper palatable. You love to eat them, but they don't satisfy you. And that's by design, because obviously they want you to eat more and then therefore buy more. So would you say the advice that we've been given, for example, we've been kind of told that we need to eat regularly, and the idea of fasting to some people is frightening. It's like, well, I think fasting is bad because, my blood sugar levels will drop, and, I'll lose my energy. And we kind of have this inbuilt belief that we should eat regularly, top up our energy stores. That's kind of what we've
Yep.
been taught. Is that therefore false? And was that
Yep.
designed by food companies? What's your take on the grazing element?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think partly it's I mean, I talk about this, I go into this side of things at length on my Way of the Carnivore Substack. If you type in wayofthecarnivore.substack.com, this idea that human beings have actually been trained to behave more like herbivores, more like herd animals or factory farmed animals than we have like our natural biological design, which is to be predators, hunters, pack hunters. So, and if you imagine it, that there's some major differences, and people are starting to behave. I mean, in the truther community, people very rudely refer to people who aren't awake like they're awake as sheep, right? But
Yeah.
there's actually more truth to that than they realize, because sheep are herd animals, right? Um, Now, these plant-eating animals, like sheep and gazelles and cows and whatever, they're surrounded by their food all day long, but the food is very poor quality. So what their job is to go around in groups, chew and crap all day long, right? And literally, like sometimes, 10 or more hours per day, they're just eating. They're eating, they're chewing, they're swallowing, they're regurgitating, they're chewing again. And that's what they have to do to get the energy and all the nutrients that they need. Predators don't don't operate in the same way. So predators have to go out into the world and they have to go and find their food, and they have to collaborate and creatively come and get it, because they're not surrounded by it the whole time. But this food is also much more nutrient dense and energy dense. So it's a very different pattern of existence being a carnivore than it is to be a herbivore. And there's nothing wrong with being a herbivore, right? The world needs these plant-eating animals. It's part of the web of life. And we all belong in the web of life. The only wrinkle in that is that you're not one, right? And we're not supposed to behave like one, and we're not supposed to think like them either. We're not supposed to be risk averse, right? When there's an attack on a herd of deer or whatever, it's like every man for himself. But they also live in fear. They live with this constant kind of state of alertness and stress, which is not healthy for human beings either. So I love the philosophical side of this, so I won't go into it too much, but you can find out more on Way of the Carnivore. So I'm toying with the idea of bringing a book out on all of that as well. But yeah, we talk about this as the great atrocity in the red pill food revolution as well, which is what they're trying. The system, whatever it is, the economy, the corporations, however you want to look at it, are trying to tell humans you don't belong. You don't belong in nature, and that your carnivorous design is shameful, right? And it's all kind of connected to this kind of misanthropy, this hatred of humanity. But what that does to us on a spiritual level as well, I think, is to say, you are the bastard children of nature. You know, you don't belong here. Like Agent Smith says in The Matrix, humans are a virus. You know, that's the way that the system wants us to think. So that but the reality is that we live in an abundant world that is full of animals that are good to eat and that we should be going out and eating. And that we do all of that in balance. And that it's good and it's right and it's divine design, if you want to think of it that way, right? But it's all in accordance with natural law. But this system that we live in, it doesn't suit the system for us to be solo, independent, collaborative, small groups of humans going out and hunting and just living in peace.
You mentioned a term. What's it called? I wrote it down somewhere. That the way that the pattern of the way the system is set out, where the owners and the rich get richer and richer, richer, richer. What's that social
it's the
system?
Pareto Principle.
Pareto Principle,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah. Can you just kind of go into that just a little bit, just seeing as we're here?
Absolutely.
We'll just touch on it because
Yeah.
it's a really interesting part of the book.
Yeah, and we go into that like near the start of the book, which is that everything in the natural world. So we have these two worlds, right? We have the natural world, the real world, and then we have the world of men, which is kind of overlaid on top of that. And they try to pretend that nature doesn't work and nature's faulty, and it needs technological fixes, and it's all nonsense. Nature's working perfectly well, and you know nature will outlive us. Don't worry about it. Nature's fine. She ain't going anywhere, right? But in nature, you have natural patterns that tend to balance, right? So if there's more lions, so let's say there's more rain means more grass, which means more antelope. More antelope means more food for the lions, so the lions will eat more, be healthier, breed more lions. If then the next year they overhunt the antelope, there'll be fewer antelope, which means the lions will die out, right? Everything tends to balance. And if the antelope's population goes very small, the lion population will also follow, right? So it all tends towards the middle, towards balance. All of that changed. And by the way, we lived for 95% of our existence very much in line and subject to those rules. Those laws, they are absolutely built into the most fundamental laws of nature, until we started farming things like grains, because then it changed the whole economic dynamic of human existence. Before then, if we overhunted, right, you go out and kill 2 mammoth instead of 1, you don't get more mammoth. This is the point. We say this in the book. You get less mammoth, because you're not going to eat.
You've just
mammoth
wasted
number 2.
a mammoth. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So there's no benefit to taking more than you need from nature. But in terms of, but when we shifted over from hunting and gathering to agriculture, which is understandable because it was all driven by climate change. The ice age came to an end. The megafauna got wiped out either by us or by the climate or some combination of the two. But then we moved into a situation where we started owning the land instead of belonging to the land. And it makes sense, you know, if I've gone to all the trouble to move all the rocks out of this bit of field and to make a field, then that's my field, right? I've put all the work into it. But then you get the situation where the people who own the land get literally reap the rewards of it, and then they can be richer because they've then got power over other people. So that's when the first power imbalances entered into human consciousness, and it's only been going on for about 10,000 years or 2,000 years in Britain, because we've only had agriculture in this country for 2,000 years. The Scots have had it for 1,500 years. Julius Caesar wrote about the coming of agriculture to the British 2,000 years ago. Because
Sorry,
we
it's
like to
just
think, oh,
that.
that's the way it always was, but no, not at all.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what blew my mind when I read the book, because I was like, gosh, there was a time when everyone was equal. Like, I'll put that in quotations. Like, everyone was just, as everyone had everything that everyone else had, and there was no class system. Like, there was a time, but then now it's all we know. Like, there are people who have more, there are people who have less, and the people who have less are always trying to get more, trying to climb this sort of invisible kind of ladder, and it's all a construct of like humans, like, and the people who own the land, like, as you said. That blew my mind. I was like, God, there was a time. But anyway, yeah, continue. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
But
go on.
yeah, I mean, it's a thought experiment, but it does seem to make sense. And you look around at the world today, and that seems to be the way it is, and it's just even more so. In fact, even the Romans, the writer Juvenal, so again going back to 2,500 years, wrote, you know, if you want to keep on top of the population, give them bread and circuses. And what is that?
Mhm.
Well, that's entertainment and cheap, innutritious food. So what do we get today? We get the football, right? And we get the corn snacks that you sit there. People sit there and we're shoving food into our face, or not really food, but we're shoving stuff into our faces. You get to the end of the tube of Pringles, you can't even remember having consumed it, you know.
Mm.
So it's a completely different attitude. And like we say, we're not designed to eat all day long. In fact, humans are designed because we store fat. And this is another mind-blowing thing that people might not appreciate. Humans are really, we're meant to be quite fat animals. A healthy adult human male should be about 20% body fat, the female around 34% body fat, right? That's healthy. That means that you're in good, you know, you're well set to reproduce, right? You lose
Mm.
too much body fat, especially if you're female, you're going to find it much harder to conceive. But you compare that to like our nearest genetic relative is the bonobo, the pygmy chimp.
Mm.
A female bonobo should have around 2% body fat, and a male bonobo has approximately zero. They just don't store fat. Gorillas, very low body fat. All of these other great apes, very low body fat, right? We are fatter than cows and elephants and a hippo, 4 to 5% body fat, right? Which is
Wow, I never would have thought that.
a quarter to a fifth of a human male, okay? And why is this? Because actually in the wild, like my Labrador here, hey mate, he's
He's
about 25,
sleeping.
30% body fat. But he's meant to be, Labrador is meant to be like pretty much like a human, about 20 odd percent body fat. And that's because we are designed to store energy between hunts, between kills.
Mm.
So that's when we have more fat cells in our body and they're smaller, right? Whereas a herbivore has a smaller number of fat cells that happen to be larger. So we are designed to feast, we're designed for a kind of a feast and famine model. So we also store any environmental toxins that come into our bodies in our fat cells. They are then released and dispelled gradually as we consume our own fat stores. And we do that specifically, you know, between kills, but we also do it on the solar cycle as well, where you we'd take in toxins from maybe grass seeds and fruits and deuterium and things like that,
Mm.
that we get in sugars and nuts and seeds, and we'd load up these toxins, which then get stored safely in our fat cells, and then we'd be breathing and peeing them out throughout the winter.
Mm.
You get up, it's a short day, you go off, behind the bush, have a wee, and you're getting rid of some of those toxins, and you start the next spring completely detoxified. But again, that's the problem. What we're doing now, we're getting fruit and sugar and everything flown in from wherever around the world. It gets flown to one place to get packaged and then flown back. And so we're having high sugar, high seed oil, all of this stuff going into our bodies 365 days a year. And we're not, our bodies just aren't getting a break when they can start to let go of some of this crap. So there's the omega-6 fats, which are known to be
Mm.
inflammatory, and they have very little purpose use in the human body other than like some structural uses. These things are building up. The average American is something like, their body fat's like 20% linoleic acid now.
Mm.
And we just
Yeah.
don't need linoleic acid. It is non-essential in the human body at all.
And it's interesting when you talk about the fact that we're unsatisfied by our food and we're grazing, and because anybody who has tried carnivore or keto, they all say the same thing. You lose your appetite, basically.
Yeah.
You eat a meal and then you're done, and you definitely don't want any more meat for a few hours, good few hours at least. And you kind of lose that addiction, like that need to visit the cupboards and visit the fridge. Like, and my husband did it. I'm since talking to Phil, I've been kind of turning more, I've been experimenting basically, and definitely like I don't want to be eating meat all day, but I'm not hungry either. So
Mm.
you're satisfied, like
Yeah.
you're
And
satisfied.
it's obvious because your body knows it's got everything it needs,
And
and
can I,
particularly with the fats, the protein is satiating, but animal fat is also satiating. So
mm,
it's something that I think almost no people understand this. Weston Price told us this, is that the absolute key to the prevention of chronic disease is the fat soluble vitamins. They are
mm,
A, D, E, and K. Now, A, D, and K are not found anywhere. And all right, D is not really a vitamin; it's more of a hormone. But these aren't found anywhere in any fats from the plant kingdom at all. There are some sources of vitamin E, like I think maybe flax, but like wheat germ oil is a good source of vitamin E. But A, D, and K, you cannot get them from any plant. Okay,
mm.
so where are you going to get those from? And never mind, we're talking about DHA and EPA, the essential fatty acids, which again you don't find practically anywhere in the plant kingdom other than some marine algae, right? And I bet I'll put money on the fact that our Paleolithic ancestors had not found a way to process omega-3 fats from marine algae.
Well, can I ask then? So there's so much research on the flip side about the benefits of plant foods. So, for example, the American Gut Project is probably one of the most famous ones, where they say eat 30 different kinds of plant foods a week. And it's been proven that the gut microbiome is more diverse and healthier if you have 30 plant foods than if you just have 10. So, let's say
Mhm.
you're eating carnivore, you'd be definitely veering more towards the 10. So, according to that research, if you're eating carnivore, your gut microbiome just won't measure up next to someone who eats like 30 plus plant
Yeah.
foods a week. So, what would you say to that?
Well, what you get if you're on a high fat carnivore diet, then you'll get a gut microbiome of a carnivore. And if you eat a lot of plants, you'll get the microbiome of an omnivore. And it's that
Explain,
simple.
explain. So,
Well,
why wouldn't you want a diverse microbiome like an omnivore, which I presume that's what you mean?
yeah. Well, I would defer to Dr. Sean Baker on this one, who's got look. Here's the thing about we know some of the things in science that we know the least about are the soil that's in the ground. You know, there's like is it Elaine Ingram? I've been doing some amazing research. The soil is far, far more complicated than we ever realized. And we treat it like
Mm.
dirt, and it's just not. It's the most complex ecosystem in the world. And then if you look at people like Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, who talks about the gut microbiome, we actually have a kind of a soil in our small intestine and large intestine as well. We kind of have this idea in our heads because we've seen diagrams in the biology textbooks that it's like some kind of just smooth tube, right? It's not. It's filled with a sludge, and that sludge is made primarily of bacteria and archaea and and other worms and parasites, all of which are potentially beneficial, and many of which can be harmful if out of balance, right? And Natasha Campbell McBride has been working on this for like 30 years with her GAPS diet, where she realized that the disease begins in the gut. In fact, she didn't invent that idea. That comes from Hippocrates. That's 3,000 years old. And he says all disease starts in the gut. So, but what Dr. Sean Baker says is the definition of a healthy gut microbiome is the gut microbiome that a healthy person has.
Mm.
Right? So you can say, well, diversity is a good thing, but that's like saying a balanced diet is a good thing. Right. Well, what is a balanced diet? To me, a balanced diet is you putting everything in that your body needs and as little as possible of what it doesn't need. Right. So that's ideal. But we have this idea that, oh, it should be at least 5 a day and it should be balanced and you should eat the rainbow. Well, why? Diversity in gut your microbiome in your gut will just reflect what it is that you eat. So there are some bacteria that will break down, for example, insoluble fiber, right? Insoluble fiber is not an essential nutrient. Soluble fiber is not an essential nutrient, right? Because they're not nutrients, because you cannot digest either of those,
Mm-hmm.
and B, then they're not essential anyway. You don't need them. In fact, they've proven that people with chronic idiopathic constipation, if they cut out all fiber from their diet, 100% of them recover. And there is a study on you can just look that up. Study on it. I think it was 60 something people with terrible chronic constipation. They asked them all to reduce or eliminate all the fiber from their diet, which is the opposite of what we're told, right? But I think insoluble fiber just works as an irritant. That's what it is. It irritates the gut because we can't digest it, and so your gut expels it.
Mm.
And we confuse that by saying, well, that improves gut transit. Well, it doesn't. It's your body going, get this stuff out of here as quickly as possible. But there are bacteria that will start to digest insoluble fiber and turn it into some short chain fatty acids, like a gorilla does, a gorilla being a hindgut digester. But the main byproduct of that is methane, which means you fart. So
Mm.
congratulations, vegans. You've done a chemical experiment, right? You pretty much stop farting when you're a carnivore because you and they say, here's another myth.
Do carnivores not fart then? Is that
Carnivore
how it is?
carnivores really don't fart, or almost not at all. I mean, if I have a couple of beers, yeah, absolutely, I know about it, right? If I have anything with sugar, I burp,
Mm.
right? Because it reacts in my stomach. But there's another common myth, which is that meat rots in the colon, which is
Mm.
complete nonsense because it's stopped being meat by the time it exits the stomach. It comes out as an amino and fat soup when it comes out of the stomach into the duodenum in the small intestine. What rots in the large intestine is plant matter, right?
Mm.
And the byproduct of that, because what is rotting? Rotting is bacterial decomposition, right? When you're on high fat, you don't even need a colon. My friend Lee Copus doesn't have a colon. It was destroyed by his vegetarian vegan diet, and he had to have it removed. So
Are you saying then that we're told that fiber is good, that
yeah,
we need to eat lots and lots of vegetables and lots of fruit, we need a diverse microbiome? Are you saying that all of that stuff isn't true, and therefore why are we being told that?
That's two excellent questions. Yeah, all of that stuff is not true. It's just demonstrably not true, because you take all those things out that we're told to eat, and your health improves. Right? People are reversing all autoimmune conditions, mental health issues. You just look at gaps like gut and psychology syndrome or gut and physiology syndrome. Natasha Campbell McBride's two books. This is the evidence for this is overwhelming, right? Look at the Harvard Carnivore survey that they did, where they looked. I think they asked 6,000 people who said that they've been on a mainly meat and fat diet for a minimum 6 months, some of them many years. And I mean, this is just basic, crude epidemiological stuff. But the number of those who said their diabetes went away, their chronic symptoms went away, just look it up. You'll be amazed. The question of why is, right. I mean, that's what we go into in depth in the Red Pill Food Revolution. But if you just look at it from the point of view of the economy, the same big money interests that own the large food companies, which, by the way, a lot of those were in tobacco until the 1950s and 1960s, and then jumped across because they really understood the science of addiction, right? But a lot of those companies now have interests in big food and in big pharma. So it actually benefits them for people to be sick. There's a lot of money in sickness. So, just on one level, that makes sense. But for people to have this kind of herbivore mindset when they're living in fear, constant state of fear, constantly high cortisol, which then suppresses your proper natural hormone expression of everything else. So people who are addicted to wheat and sugar and caffeine, and men will have lower testosterone, for example. And men with lower testosterone are less likely to turn around and go, hang on, there's something not right here, and I'm going to do something about it. Right. So it definitely suits the economy. Let's just call it the economy. We don't have to talk about owners and all this conspiracy stuff. But yeah, it's
Would you
if you
say, I mean, there's a big push for veganism and to go as plant-based as possible.
yeah.
Meat is bad for the environment. Would you say that is part of this kind of, again, it benefits the economy, as you'd say?
It benefits an agenda of one kind. If you look at the World Economic Forum in their video looking ahead to 2030, said you will eat a lot less meat for your health and for our planet. But again, the evidence just isn't there. I mean, look at it this way. We've had ruminants have been on Earth, we think, for approximately 50 million years, right? And the first ones were small forest dwelling things. So ruminants, as in they've got a rumen, so they digest the plant matter before it gets to the intestines. But we've had deer, elk, and the precursors of cattle for millions of years. We know exactly how many of these species, like bison and whatever, there were on Earth at any point in time, which is exactly as many as the environment could support. Okay. There was more biomass of ruminants in North America before the arrival of the Europeans than there is now. Okay, maybe just slightly more. So, and guess what? One thing we know for a fact is that the Earth didn't choke itself to death on methane and stuff, and didn't overheat. In fact, we're in a relatively cool period right now. In the long-term solar cycle, we're in a cool period because we've just come out of some ice ages. We're probably due another ice age come along at any time now as well. So it's just absolute nonsense, this idea that meat is bad for the planet. That's like saying the fish are bad for the ocean. Right? How can it be the case? That is not how nature works. But for them to pull this trick to make you think, oh no, I need to eat wheat and Oreos and Pringles and stuff instead of a steak, they need to break our conditioning. They need to get us to think that we are no longer part of nature. And that is the great atrocity. And that, if you can imagine how that affects us on an emotional and spiritual level, what they're saying to us is you guys don't belong. You don't
Mm.
belong here. You should be ashamed of yourselves, right? So to me, that's like a new original sin.
Mm.
You know,
It's
you are
really
born
interesting.
as a consumer, and you're born wrong, and you need to redeem yourself by saying, I'm vegan. Veganism has only been around since about the 1950s. There is not one native population anywhere known in the world that abstains from animal products. Most of them get 60, 70% of their nutrition from the animal kingdom. And this, remember, is because we're in an interglacial period, right? During the last ice age, we were practically exclusively carnivores, but there is not one vegetarian population, not one natural indigenous vegetarian population on Earth, right? If we were meant to be eating plants, if that was right, then there'd be at least one, wouldn't there?
I mean, sometimes I had this conversation with Dr. Bill Schindler, actually, and he said, if I remember rightly, he said that his wife used to be vegan. And he said, but he understood why she was. And I also understand because um, out there, there isn't a lot of good quality meat. Out there, there's a lot of cruel treatment of animals, and you go to a normal supermarket and you really have to fish around for the best quality stuff and the stuff that you trust, like organic and ethically dealt with. And so I think a lot of people are put off by eating meat because of they just don't trust what they're buying. Um,
Mm.
so, I mean, I kind of it's I understand, like, there's been times when I've gone to the supermarket and because I don't like what's on offer, I'll just say, "Oh, I just won't bother buying any of the meat today, and I'm just gonna, have some, vegetables or like salads and things like that, and I'll just make do for a while." So I kind of get it. Do you understand where vegans or vegetarians even, do you understand where they're coming from in that sense? And in
Yeah,
that case, what
100%.
advice would you give them? Because me trying to be carnivore, it has been quite difficult. I haven't pulled it off, to be honest, this week because I just can't get enough of the meat, basically. Like, I can't
Yeah.
buy enough of it. Cayman's also very expensive as well. I don't know if you know that, but buying food is so expensive, like especially meat. So it's like, what would you say to people who would struggle for ethical reasons, for quality reasons, and for financial reasons? Like they
Yeah.
just can't do hyper carnivore.
Yeah, absolutely. The financial one is really interesting. So we'll deal with that one quickly. That there's this idea that meat is expensive, which is actually not true. Pound for pound, it's much more expensive than most things, right? But in terms of the nutrition that you get for your dollar or whatever, for your unit of currency, it's really cheap. And animal fat in particular as well. So, one trick, for example, because we should be getting, say, 25% of what goes in our mouth should be fat, really. And by the way, the more animal fat that you eat, the more body fat that you burn, that you lose. You will gravitate to your proper shape. We have people who are underweight will gain weight on carnivore. We have people who are overweight will shed the weight. It's so obviously your natural way of being. So, but if I go to my butcher, I can buy really good grass-fed fat for £2 a kilo. Okay. Now, if I go to my local supermarket and buy ribeye steaks, I'm paying £25 a kilo for those steaks. So the fat on those steaks is costing me £25 a kilo as well. So I can just buy mince from there, and I buy extra fat from the butcher at £2 a kilo. Combine those, and that's what I eat. But yeah, there's so these the three main arguments for vegetarianism. Say our environment, and that's just not true. I mean, the opposite of life is not death, by the way. And this also goes into the ethics. The opposite of life is not death. Death is the flip side of life. It's the opposite side of the coin. For every life, you always have one death. The opposite of life is lifelessness, which is when you eradicate the cycle. You stop the spinning. You stop the cycle of life. And the best way to do that is to destroy the soil. You destroy a whole ecosystem. And that's what a field is, by the way.
Mm.
And I mean, we haven't even touched on this one, but the destruction of the soil is actually the big environmental issue that's facing us right now. It's not going on above our heads.
I can't believe you said that the Sahara Desert used to be like luscious, but because they destroyed the soil, it became the Sahara Desert.
Yeah,
Like,
this is in the Roman Empire, and we're only going back 2,000 plus years, right? They grew most of their olives and most of their grains in North Africa, which is now called the Sahara Desert, right? The
crazy.
Sahara Desert, and this is another thing. It's a desert. It's not a desert because it doesn't rain there. It doesn't rain because it's a desert as well.
Yeah,
Vegetation actually induces precipitation. So that's something else
right.
that we. But
Yeah.
that's a whole different topic. So yeah, you eradicate every living thing other than the one species that you want in order to have a field, right? So we have this image in our minds that rolling fields is a lovely natural way to be, but it's not. It's absolutely destructive, and it kills the soil in about 500 years, which is why every civilization has wiped itself out in that
That's
time, and we talk
crazy.
about in the
Yeah,
book.
that's crazy.
So the environmental thing, complete BS, utter bullshit. Um, the health thing, utter bullshit, right? People are destroying their health by avoiding the meat and by putting all these lectins, gluten, all the plant toxins into their body. And they then, I mean, most people I know who are a carnivore have been vegetarian or vegan at some point because
Mhm.
they've just like hit the wall quicker than most other people. So the health thing's complete nonsense, utter nonsense. And the ethics is fascinating to me. But like we say, I go into that a lot on Way of the Carnivore. We are supposed to eat other animals, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with eating other animals. If there was, you're making 70% of all animal
Mhm.
species known to science wrong.
Mhm.
As in, and thereby you are making nature wrong, or any intelligent force behind nature wrong as well. So you're making God wrong at the same time while you're at it. Now, the only interest I could see in making God wrong or nature wrong would be some other entity that wants to take the place of that ultimate power, right? So I'll leave it at that. It cannot be immoral or unethical. So, but as to your question about finding good quality meat, even the worst meat is healthier than the best plants, right? Because even grain finished, all beef, by the way, even in US and everywhere, is has to be started on pasture, because if it's not, it wouldn't even make it to the feedlot. Never mind processing weight. So they have to start them on grass and whatever, and then they give them grains. Here's something that. Do you want to hear something else fascinating?
Yeah.
Another truth bomb is great. I found a pamphlet from 1931, I think it was, from like the Oregon Pig Growers Association. Um, we're told that the best way to start the day is cereal and skim milk, right?
Mhm.
But skimmed milk was always used as it was a waste product of the cream and butter making industry, right? So, and what did they do? They fed it to pigs. They fed it to pigs to fatten the pigs. And I actually went back and I found a source on this. We've known for thousands of years that the way to make a pig or um, a beef animal or a duck or a goose fat quickly is to force feed it grains, give it only grains, right? High in carbohydrates makes it fat. That's how they make foie gras. It's very, very cruel practice, right? They literally force feed these geese and ducks grains. But what they found in this pamphlet was there was actually a report from the 1930s to say, right, we've tested feeding hogs on grain, and we've tested feeding hogs on grain and skimmed milk, and the grain and skim milk fattens them up to market weight far quicker than giving them just grain alone, which still fattens them up quicker than normal. And the reason that they said in this pamphlet is because it makes it hyper palatable. You mix your cereals with skimmed milk, and that makes you put on weight. And what are we told to give our children before we send them off to school every day?
Cereals.
Breakfast cereal, and
Yeah.
ideally with skimmed milk. Don't put whole milk in there.
Yes. Yes. Oh God,
It's,
this is frightening. Like
everything,
it's mind blowing. Like,
everything.
what do you trust, Ben? I don't know what to do. Like,
Trust what
seriously,
works.
what do we do?
No, be your own authority, right? What did we always trust? We trusted our elders,
Mhm.
right? We trusted our parents, and we
Which is
trusted
fine.
our own
Yeah.
direct experience, right? The problem is that our what we're told today is, you trust the people in the white coats and you trust the politicians. You trust the national dietary guidelines, which have been shown are completely sponsored by big food, right? Um, but that's all that I would say to anyone is try it for yourself. Do 90 days when you are fueling your body instead of carbohydrates, sugar, seed oils, right? It's all about the macronutrients. Instead, just fuel your body with fats from the animal kingdom and see the difference for yourself. Because
And
I promise you, you go 90 days, you'll never go back.
I think that's probably a good time to kind of go into the big fat challenge, which I think is like, how often do you run them? How does it work?
Well, yeah, we started that at the beginning of 2023, but now so all the material is recorded. You can start it at any time. You
Oh.
get a year's access to it for a single payment. And so, but yeah, everything's there. And we've also got, if you come up with a question that we haven't answered in the material, then you drop us an email and Phil and I will answer the question and we'll post it into the members area. So
Mm.
you can join at any time, follow along
Yeah.
and do
And
it for yourself.
I have
So
to
that's at
say, like, I've
thebigfatchallenge.com. Yeah.
yeah, right. And I have to say, like, having spoken to you now and spoken to Phil as well, like, you guys obviously live and breathe this. Like, this is your life. This is, he's had life experience with this. You've had life experience with this. You've written books together. You're super passionate, both of you, about this, the way that we should be eating, the way we're designed to eat. So I think, if any program is worth doing, it's doing this one because you guys who run it, like, to have access to you is such a gift, like for anybody who joins it. What about anything else that's coming up for you? Do you have any other books coming up, or what are you working on at the moment?
Well, I'm working on the way of the carnivore because there's so many people now
Substack, yeah.
talking about the health benefits of an animal-based diet. There's loads of people talking about regenerative agriculture and how that's good for
Mm,
the soil and actually builds the soil. Which, but there's very few people diving into the philosophy and the ethics of it. So I think that's really interesting. So that might turn into a book maybe in 2025. We'll see on that one. Um, but yeah, we're running the UK Carnivore Conference in September
ooh,
in the UK. We're doing a Keto Brain Health Conference in October. We've got
lovely.
a Carnivore Conference going on in Spain, but there's only
Mm,
2 rooms left for that one. That's also in October of this year. Um, but yeah, the main thing that people can do is try it for yourself. And
mm,
that's the thing, we're not dogmatic, you know. I've got no, you know, um, axe to grind with this. I do believe that the way to be healthy and happy and successful in life is to live in accordance with our evolutionary design, with our biology. But that's only because that's what it seems to work. If veganism worked, right, if it was better for your health, if it was better for animals, and if it was better for the environment, I would be promoting that. The
mm,
problem is it isn't on all respects. It kills far more animals and causes far more death than eating. If you eat beef, if you eat exclusively beef, you will be individually responsible for the death of one animal per year, right? An animal that lives on pasture and actually generates, creates soil and creates a rich ecosystem. If you live your life consuming row crops, then you are promoting the widespread biocide, ecocide of the living world.
mm,
So yeah, unfortunately, everything that we are told is good and right and healthy and natural is the opposite of the truth.
mm.
And like, yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow, unfortunately.
Like your book, so the Red Pill Food Revolution, I'd recommend it to anybody. I think it's a great read, and I have to say that one of the most frightening parts of the book are the Machiavellian quotes, and I'll just let people buy the
Goodness.
book and
Yes.
they'll know what I mean. Like the Machiavellian quotes are peppered peppered throughout the book, and it's just frightening what this guy was saying about what we need to do, like to get what
Yeah.
people need to do to get in control. And it's just that is people just need to buy the book and just see what I'm talking about. It's like, whoa, it's
Yeah,
insane.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it is. And like I think we quote John Lennon in there as well, saying that we live in a insane world run by maniacal people for maniacal objectives. And that's it. But you know what? At the same time, the truth shall set you free. Right?
Mm,
All we're trying to do, we're not trying to frighten anybody. There's no benefit in that.
mm.
And also, I don't know if you got to the last three chapters yet, but that's when we talk about the solution.
Okay.
We talk about how we can regain control over our own minds, over our own health, and then also over our society as well, so that we can have more balanced, more, proper energy flow,
Mm,
um, and we can live in a more peaceful and healthy and natural, satisfying way. And we do think that is possible, um, but the first step, like they say, to getting over your problem is to admit that you've got one, and so that's what we have to do in this book, unfortunately.
mm.
But yeah, when we do
It's
that, then you can say, "Oh, how do we solve it?" And
yeah.
the solution is possible.
Well, that's reassuring for sure. So, how can people get hold of you? What's the best way for people to find you?
Uh, well, I mean, we've got several Substacks. We've got the
Mm,
bigfatsubstack.com. We've got wayofthecarnivore.substack.com, and also my own like main business, which is prosperousmind.substack.com, which is where I help people to create an information business for themselves. You can go to thebigfatchallenge.com, or if you check out benhunt.com, then that's the site for my writing business as well. So yeah, I've got lots of fingers in lots of pies, but they're all meat based pies
yeah,
at this.
lovely. I like that. Oh, Ben, thank you so much. That was such a great conversation. I took away so much from that, and I'm sure everyone else did who's listening. So, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute privilege.